King Henry VIII was one of the most cruel kings the Renaissance ever saw. He went from being considered the very embodiment of the Renaissance, a tall, young, and athletic prince, to an absolute monster in just a few years. A monster responsible for some of the most horrifying acts one human could inflict upon another. But in the end, he died a horrible death himself. Let's start at the beginning. Henry Tudor was born on June 28, 1491. When he became king at the age of 17, he was considered strikingly handsome, with red gold hair and regal bearing. A Venetian ambassador once remarked that Henry was more handsome than any Christian prince of the time, but his reign took a dark and brutal turn. The defining moment came in January 1536 during a jousting tournament at Greenwich. At age 44, Henry was thrown from his horse, which then fell on top of him. Unconscious for 2 hours, he survived, but the injury to his right leg never healed properly. Over time, the wound ulcerated and emitted a foul stench that courtiers were forced to endure in silence. That same year, Henry ordered the execution of his second wife, Anne Boleyn, on highly questionable charges of adultery, incest, and treason. Some historians argue that the fall may have caused a traumatic brain injury, which exacerbated his already volatile temperament. In the years that followed, Henry's paranoia, violence, and erratic decisions intensified, mirroring his physical decline. Following the accident, Henry's weight ballooned. Once lean with a waist of 35 inches, his weight likely exceeded to nearly 400 pounds. He became so immobile that a pulley system was required to move him between rooms, and doorways were widened to accommodate his size. Records suggest he consumed over 5,000 calories a day, largely from red meat, rich pies, and little to no vegetables. Wine and ale flowed freely. Combined with his sedentary lifestyle, this accelerated his deterioration. His leg ulcers worsened. The treatments of the day, cauterization, arsenic and mercury poultices, and bloodletting only deepened his suffering. But with time, Henry's health worsened. By the 1540s, Henry suffered from multiple serious conditions, likely type 2 diabetes, gout, hypertension, possibly congestive heart failure, and advanced leg gangrene. While some earlier historians even suspected syphilis. Emotionally and mentally, Henry became unrecognizable. The once dazzling prince had grown erratic and cruel. He executed trusted allies and even relatives, including Thomas Cromwell and his cousin, Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey, just days before his own death. Obsessed with security, he demanded food tasters and strict inspections of all utensils. The court lived in fear. An ill-timed word could result in a death sentence. By late 1546, Henry could barely move. The smell of his rotting body permeated the royal apartments, and he drifted in and out of delirium. Witnesses claimed he muttered the names of his deceased wives, especially Jane Seymour and Anne Boleyn. But English law made it treasonous to predict the king's death, so his courtiers and physicians continued the fiction of his recovery even as he lay dying. On January 27, 1547, Archbishop Thomas Cranmer was summoned to Henry's bedside. Unable to speak, the king squeezed Cranmer's hand in affirmation of his Christian faith. Hours later, in the early morning of January 28th, he died at the age of 55. Henry's immense size made embalming extremely difficult. The rudimentary techniques of the time, removing internal organs and stuffing the body with herbs, were no match for his advanced decomposition. A custom-made coffin was required. As his remains awaited burial in the chapel at Sion Abbey, disaster struck. Chroniclers reported that bodily fluids leaked from the coffin during the night. The fluid pooled on the floor and was allegedly licked up by stray dogs, a detail seized upon by later commentators as symbolic of his ignoble end. His funeral, delayed until February 16th, was conducted with full royal ceremony, despite the overpowering stench. He was interred in St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle beside Jane Seymour. And so, the man who once dazzled Europe with his charm, intellect, and power, King Henry VIII, left the world not with glory, but in decay and dread. His reign, marked by splendor and savagery, reshaped England forever. He broke with Rome, dissolved centuries of tradition, and ruled through fear, leaving behind a kingdom divided and uncertain. When news of his death quietly spread through the land, there were no public outcries, no weeping masses, just silence, caution, and a nervous glance toward the future. Henry had ruled like a god, but in the end, he died like a dog.